All right. So I was in the faction leadership meeting with a bunch of the guys, and they were talking about issues about faction related stuff, and we figured out pretty fast that there is not really a faction problem that is currently standing right now, except that factions themselves have a lot of gear, a lot of excessive gear, which could be toned down a bit, but that's probably subject for something else. Scott and Ace, after I put in some of my feedback, I was asked if I could write down or perhaps even make a recording of what exactly I had in mind to rebalance, restructure the Stalker gameplay loop. And as it currently stands, as most of the staff members already know, that people start spawning in Rostock and have very small space or a very small area to obtain a starting fund. Taking the underground, moving to inserted locations where they actually, begin their adventure. So the issue with that, what I've been seeing is that the Stalkers get thrown into an area where faction conflict, faction wars, etc., take place. So that little or that amount of money that they take in Rostock to then make it up to Janov or to even the factions themselves to either do trade or get a job, evolves around that Stalkers, when they leave the location of the fast travel, they either set up in Janov immediately, which kind of catapults them into the mid-end game cycle, in my opinion, or they choose to branch out and do dealings with factions, and the factions are more or less, depending on the results, what the Stalkers do, they give them equipment that is not really always equivalent to the job. So for very little effort, Stalkers get a lot of gear. And during that meeting, I was, as I mentioned before, I was told to put in some input. So this is my attempt here. So the idea that I had was, since Skadovsk is, the high loot area, if you do not want to be involved running into the Scar or in Quarry or even Pripyat, you would kind of go up here into the Skadovsk area. And I'm fully aware that the majority of staff members do not want Skadovsk area to be the beginning area for Stalkers, since it has high it has a high recognizability for the 2013 server, and I can understand why you want to distance yourself from that, because this is a different server, this is your brand. I get it. So the idea was taking military off of this grid up in the northwestern area and putting them down into installation, I think it's 04, I might be wrong, never mind it. But putting them down here, and why, I'll come to that in a second. The idea that I'm working on right now is this village over here is barely being used, except for some events, as well as the docks or the harbor. So revitalizing this area as a starter point for Stalkers, where perhaps even veteran Stalkers or a player merchant sets up shop in these locations here, would start excuse me, would start in the northern part of the map that is excluded from, let's see, this is Sunken Village. It would exclude Stalkers from being thrown into these conflict areas between factions, and would have, there are a lot of places where Stalkers could run to at the beginning and start making money for themselves, right? So they're, you know, setting up spawn points for mutants, for loot caches, minor loot caches, obviously, since it is, since we want to consider this as a starting area where people start looting up, getting prepared for their venturing forth, right? So you would have a lot of these corners set up as a noob or a beginner friendly. Yeah, if we actually consider it, this could be Rookie Village 2.0. I'll just call it Rookieville for the sake of it, right? And you would have this complete area, which is large enough to hold 30, 40 plus Stalkers, instead of having this small area for that amount of Stalkers is just not enough, right? So this is just me blabbering here, right? So, but yeah, having this whole area as a Stalker controlled point, or a Stalker beginning area, and then once they have accumulated enough cash and gear to then venture out into these areas where factions fight against each other, where Pripyat is at the brink, they would then have the opportunity to either then go to the factions, start working for them, or they would take a safe route to be able to reach Yanov. And then with the beginning of Yanov, you would perhaps not only have, I can't think of his name. Is it Ashshot? I think it's Ashshot. So then you would have Ashshot, perhaps even a player play Ashshot's second hand. You already had a player vendor set up here, could probably do the same thing, right? Then the Stalkers, when they actually made their choice to come to Yanov, reaching that middle to end game area, they could then decide to like branch out and then make their choices. So the choices would then be like, do I want to work for duty, freedom, military, ecos, bandits, the player vendor, the veterans, or go straight to Yanov and start working there? And you can already see on the graph here that, you know, everything would kind of evolve around this area, this top area, and the choice that the player can take as a Stalker is more valued, in my opinion, so that they have the freedom of choice to do what they want to do, instead of being thrown or using that underground system to then be forced to interact with factions, because some people just don't want to do that, right? They want to do shit on their own pace. And if a firefight comes up, you know, and they're not involved into it, they might get lucky, they might grab some gear, they might be unlucky, being caught during it and being shot, but it's all about the choice of freedom, or the freedom of choice in that term. So you would have these areas, the areas down here, which have then like mid-tier stuff like Firefly, this crossing over here, and then obviously this is high danger areas. As far as I'm aware, this location is currently occupied by Monolith forces. They have some sort of FOB set up here. Like there are a lot of places where then the mid-tier game can start taking place, right? So the loop, if I would call it that way, would then evolve around Janov. If we see it as a two-step, yeah, you get what I mean. Then on this second stage, people would start branching out, working from Janov, and then perhaps even going into faction related stuff, right? So once that is then complete, because in my opinion, Stalkers live from their reputation, so the reputation would then increase if they choose to work for factions, or if they just make up a name for themselves under the Stalker population, form up groups, take assignments, one of both, and then venture into Pripyat. And for that, and for the topic Pripyat, there's actually something that I also had in mind. I was made aware of the idea making Pripyat a bit smaller, either through rad zones, not rad zones, psi fields, or increased mutant population so that people can't be quiet in Pripyat, which is, it's kind of bullshit. But having only one entry point into Pripyat is, at its current state, absolutely fine. I would, however, think about having, there's like this bridge over here with the main road leading where Palace of Culture is like directly in line of sight of it. So perhaps opening up a small gap in the psi field so that people can take a direct approach in to Pripyat. And obviously this location here would be, fortified. Well, not fortified, but they would be controlled under monolith forces, so that if people would choose to venture through this main path, they would have to fight for it. So the decision would be, do I go through the tunnel system, fight against mutants, and then enter Pripyat? Hashtag a PvE way in, or do people choose a PvP way inside if they think they're competent enough to kill the monolith forces, grab whatever they can, and either pull out or venture deeper in and get the good stuff? This would alleviate the pressure on Monolith right now, because as far as I understood, they are kind of suffering from it. People coming into Pripyat over the tunnel system, they don't have that early warning system as other servers have introduced it. So people can sneak in, they can log out in an area, wait for the server to restart, reloot the whole thing again, just wait until, if you play on the server long enough, when people are online and when they are not. Yeah, just wait until people are not online, loot the whole fucking place twice, thrice, and then head out with big kahuna gains. So that is definitely an issue, and I think that Monolith would have it better if the area, I actually don't know where exactly you come out after the tunnel system, so it's either here or it's here. I think it's here somewhere. So either in this location, that Monolith has an increased presence, or it would be here. So it would alleviate the faction Monolith in total, while they are not being forced to patrol Pripyat all day just to find one fucking stalker that uses a silenced gun to farm the shit out of the place and then just log out without Monolith having a chance to do anything, right? So these are my thoughts on the whole thing. I'm not sure if I'm going to put this in text format or if I'm just going to record this and throw it out. Yeah, that's my take. Thanks.